Hello, welcome back to Quarterlight. Quarterlight is your car brochure channel. We're very much a fledgling channel, so we do appreciate your support. Today we're going to look at the Citroen BX. So let's run the titles and we'll look at a bit more details of that lovely French car with the magic carpet ride. So the Citroen BX, a car unveiled underneath the Eiffel Tower in France in October 1982, arriving in the UK in August 1983. It was designed to use new lightweight plastic body panels, really keeping that weight as low as possible, and there to replace the now aging GSA. The brochure we're going to look at is from the UK and it's from 1984. In fact, this particular one has also got a dealer stamp on there as well, from York, and we'll have a look at that as well. But this is going to be the Mark I version of the Citroen BX, and we'll also compare it to how it changed to the Mark II in 1986. So there we go, another look at that front cover, and you can see that dealer stamp a little bit better here. Your Citroen dealer, Halls Garage Limited, Lowther Street, York. I wonder what's there. Anyone living in York knows what's there now. Would be nice to know if there is still some kind of dealership, particularly if it's still a Citroen dealership. This particular front graphic really showing that low coefficient of the Citroen BX at 0.34, following that tradition of the GSA being a very slippery model. But anyway, let's open the page up and have a little bit more look in a bit more detail of the car. So opening the first page, it gives you some little bit of comparisons of this new car, with its talking about this low drag of 0.34, more space compared to the GSA it was trying to replace, although at this time actually the GSA was still being sold. Less weight, it says the BX body shell has 40% fewer parts and weighs around 80 pounds less than the comparably sized Citroen GS. It then goes on to say about these new components. The bonnet being made of a polyester fiberglass, and etc. Talking about these lighter weight modern new materials. It then talks about it being loves driving, and in fact at the time in the UK it was actually advertised as loves driving, hates garages. Now the reason why it says that is because the GSA it was replacing had a real sort of higher than average cost of maintenance, and the BX was really trying to work in that it was going to be a less maintenance car than the GSA, so that's why it's talking about loves driving, hates garages, and like I say, it mentions this loves driving in this text as well. And then it talks about the highly practical of it being a hatchback. As we all know, a hatchback at this time was the right way to go. Everyone wanted hatchbacks for moving, who knows, the wardrobe around or whatever you need to move around in your car in the 80s. And you can also see on this graphic, this black BX here, you can really identify it as the early BXs, particularly these indicators being a much smaller indicator. Later on the indicator was the same size as the headlamp, and there was lots of other changes, but I always think that's the most identifiable feature of these early BXs from the outside. And this next page is really the second half of the advertisement. Like we say, the first half saying loves driving, this now says hate garages, and this is what we're talking about when we say it's a much simpler car to maintain than what the GSA was. And here now we're kind of like looking at the different ranges or different models of the BX at this time. The most basic model, well, actually was just called the BX, and it was quite a rare car. It was a special order only vehicle at this time, and although it still had that 1360cc as the 14E, etc., it did have less brake horsepower, so it had 62 brake horsepower compared to the 72 brake horsepower of the rest of the BX14 models. It also had a 4-speed gearbox instead of a 5-speed gearbox. Other than that, the specs seemed to be the same, but a very unusual model why somebody would actually choose that. It wasn't hugely cheaper really. I do have a price list so we could have a look at that later on. So it wasn't hugely cheaper, so it was a strange model, and like I say, it became just a special order model only. Today, what a collectible car that would be. I imagine that would be a very rare, super basic poverty spec BX. I wonder if there's any of them out there. The most basic model proper would have been the BX14E. At least it wasn't a special order, it was, you know, just the more basic model, and that had the normal 72 brake horsepower engine. And we're talking about BXs, we're talking about the BX14, the BX16, the BX19. Like I said, the 14 had a 1400 engine, the 16 a 1600 engine, the 19 a 1900 engine, etc, etc. And that's kind of like how Citroen badged these vehicles at this time. But anyway, let's move on up the range. Now we climb the ladder to the 14RE. The same mechanicals as the E, but a bit more equipment. So you had things like central locking, electric windows, rear wash wipe. It says protective side mouldings and a quartz digital clock, etc, etc. The nice thing about this picture, you can really shows you that square rear bumper of these early ones. They kind of like rounded them off on the Mark II, but these early ones had a very square bumper on them. We now move up to the top of the range model, or the most luxurious model at the time in the UK, the 16 TRS. Possibly my favourite model, and this one had such features as standard electric windows all round. But let's look at this in a bit more detail, because it's a nice page to make some comparisons. And as we look at this in a little bit more detail, one of the nicest things I found about these top of the range models is this little extra window you didn't have on the lower spec models. The interesting thing with this extra window is that actually all the BXs had the hole cut out for these windows, but the lower spec one just put a plastic panel in there, where on this top of the range one you did actually have an actual window. Also, this is a great page because it really shows this interior cluster really well. Very much GSA inspired, with this sort of like weighing scale type speedo and these hand controls right at your fingertips for all the controls, very similar to what the GSA had. Very Citroen. Now when the Series 2 came out in 86, all this changed. So if I compare with the later interior, and this is actually a French brochure, you can see the changes to a much more conventional layout. Now at the fingertips we've just got things like hazard warning lights, fog lamps, etc on these little stalks, but we've got conventional stalks now, which we didn't on the previous model, and also this very conventional speedo. Now if you look at the Citroen BX GT19 at 1984, it was kind of like a combination of them both. So if I just throw that one up, I don't know if we can see them all at the same time, we may be able to. There we go. You can see on this one it's got the conventional speedos and rev counter, but still the very quirky light switches, wiper switches that we did on this early model. So this was kind of like a combination of the both, which is my favourite by far, that very early one. I did like these little speedos that Citroen had, and I also prefer this more conventional steering wheel. Citroen always liked to have like a one-stalk system where it can change to this big bulky more conventional design. I did prefer this more basic design, but there we go. I just thought I'd throw that up there just to show you some of the differences as the BX evolved. I also thought, while I'm at it, why not throw a comparison between the newer and later BXs. This is of course our brochure. We're looking at the early Mark 1s. This is the Mark 2. They're both silver higher spec models with that extra winder in them. But more importantly, yeah, this is the Mark 2, this is the Mark 1, and you can see the changes. Most noticeable from the outside are these bumpers, which have kind of got rounded off where they were very square on the early models. Like I say, the most noticeable difference I always find is with this indicator being a very much smaller unit. You can also see the very squared bumper on the early ones, where the newer ones quite often had these clear light indicators rather than the amber ones. But more importantly, you can see that indicator is the full size, whereas this has been shortened off, and the bumpers, of course, like I say, rounded on these ones. The early ones much more squared off. And like I said, the interiors really where the big changes happened, and I kind of think it's quite sad they went to a more conventional layout. Whether that was an influence from Peugeot, I'm not sure. This is now a look at the interior of that top of range 16 TRS. So a little bit more luxury. We've got head restraints all round on these. This cloth in upholstery, which doesn't look particularly very special, but they are extremely comfortable seats. And it's also talking about tinted windows, rear sun blinds, alloy wheels. You've got the sunroof. You've got that 4-speed auto gearbox, which is an option. Rear seat belts, etc, etc. And it's also talking here, note, air conditioning shown, which is this little picture on the right, will be available during 1985. So previous to that, that wasn't even an option. We now move on to the Citroen BX 19 GT, a car that came out and launched in 1985. Interesting on this picture, the front bumper doesn't look like it has the best quality on there. But there we go. This is like your larger engined Citroen BX. And then inside the Citroen BX 19 GT, you can see this kind of half conventional gauges, half not. So the gauges themselves, so the speedo, rev counter, fuel gauge, etc., is very conventional. And then you've got these quite wacky controls, Citroen S controls, because of course this is still the Series 1 or Mark 1, however you want to call it. This particular one, like I said, it had a 1905cc petrol engine, so 105 brake horsepower now, 5-speed gearbox, top speed 115 miles per hour, 0 to 60 in 9.9 seconds. Same sort of equipment on the 16 TRS, plus it says the addition of responsive power steering as standard and exclusive diagonally tweed cloth upholstery, which does look very nice, I must admit. It's also got this like a onboard computer, if you will, which looks more like a calculator, but there you go, a little bit of technology as well. Of course, later on we got things like the BX GTI, and then later on we had the 16 valve as well. And then we come to what was a real game changer for the BX the diesels, only offered in one trim at this time. This is the BX 19RD, which was the same spec as the petrol 16RS. That had a 1905cc engine. Now this is before we got the turbo diesels. This is just a normally aspirated diesel, so not a particularly quick car. So 0 to 60 in 15.4 seconds, top speed of 98. Helped by that lightweight body, but it wasn't certainly not going to make any sort of speed records. I think that huge advancement of the turbo diesels really helped them make them a really good car. But nevertheless, like I say, it was a huge thing for the BX, becoming the best-selling diesel in the UK for 1987, 88, 89, 90. It was a huge win, particularly when you're talking about selling a foreign car in the UK. Yes, the UK was more accepting of foreign cars in the 80s, but still, that was a huge shift for Citroen, and it was a hugely successful vehicle. As often is the case, later on in these brochures, we got technical specifications, equipment specifications for the different levels of models and the diesels and the petrol to compare. So if you wanted to pause this video, I think you can just about make out some of the numbers there. It was a hard one to focus on because the writing is so small, but I think you get an idea of the different models here. And then finally we come to a page entitled Better Ideas Build Better Cars, talking about safety, and safety was really becoming more and more of a sales point now in the 80s. And also talk about cutting cost of ownership, etc. And that's where this particular brochure ends. I finally just wanted to touch on the price list. This is the Citroen price list that came with the brochure. Again, that Hawes garage in York. And this particular one is dated 1st of February 1985. And if you remember, the brochure itself was August 1984. So it makes reasonable sense this brochure was given out early in 85 with this price list. So here is a look at that price list. I've tried to get it as clear as I can, but being orange, it's quite a difficult one to focus perfectly on, but I've tried my best. We'll pick out a few interesting models on here. So if we're looking at the BX, it does show that extremely basic BX at the top for £5,198 pounds and 86 pence. So that was the model, if you remember, had that 4-speed gearbox, lower brake horsepower, the real budget model. You even had to get that as a special order model. So for just £400 more, you could get the actual proper model, the 14RE. So like I say, I can't imagine many people bought that super basic model, unless it was sold as like a fleet vehicle. I'm not sure, but I wonder how many were sold, and indeed if any of those are left. It went up to the highest price one, which was that 19 GT, which was £7,498 and 67 pence. Now if we look at the GSA, yeah, the GSA is still being sold at this point. The Saloon, £4,998, so just below that super basic BX. So that little GSA special with a 5-speed gearbox might have been a nice little buy, to be honest with you, just below the BX, and certainly a very interesting car, that GSA. We've also got on here showing the Citroen 2CV, which was the most basic and least expensive Citroen in the range. The most basic one was the Special. That was £2,774 and 47 pence. Would be so nice to buy one today for that much. Even a second-hand one, a nice second-hand one, you struggle to pay that much for it now. But there we go. We've also got the LNA, the Visa. and the CX. So the most expensive Citroen on here is the Citroen CX, and it's the CX 25 Prestige IE automatic for £16,832.46. A very expensive car at the time, and I'm still not paying £16,000 for cars even now, so just to put that in context. And also on the right hand side, a nice little thing where you pick the car of your choice, what options you want, number plates, delivery charge, and what your total price would have been. Not filled out here, but a nice little feature nevertheless. So there we go, the Citroen BX, a car designed by Marcello Gandini Alberto, and up there with one of my favourite cars, to be honest with you. I've tried to keep this video as short as I can, but I could easily make it twice as long, to be honest with you. I did own a BX way back when I was in college, and unfortunately, after a little bit of enjoyment, the timing belt did snap, and that was kind of like the end of that sort of dream. But nevertheless, I do like the BXs. That wasn't really a fault of the car, it was a very high mileage version. And we are seeing the prices of the BX coming up and up. It is certainly rising. They are becoming a more collectible vehicle these days. Problems with the BX? Well, build quality was a bit, on various models you could get a good one, you could get a bad one. Build quality wasn't always that good, although with all them plastics on it, it certainly did resist the rust, as you know, the metal panels were replaced with plastic ones, I guess, but they did last quite well. But thank you so much for watching today's video. Please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you very soon. So goodbye and take care.